forming collectives. People are getting together to pray. They're forming their own churches. If they don't trust their own church, they say, well, let's just have our own church. Doesn't matter what denomination.
Exactly, and they're creating their own media. And if you look at it, we were talking in the car today, they're attacking the individual farms and co-ops here in Austin. People buying their own cows, sharing them, their own farms. The feds and state are freaking out. All over the country, people are starting home churches, different denominations, different religions. They're shutting them down with zoning.
Didn't some community pass a law where you can't have more than 2 people together to...
Yeah, California and areas of California, Colorado, but
you're not allowed to assemble in your own house now. It was some sort of weird law like that, right?
Exactly. The reason I'm gibbering in excitement is you're absolutely right. The system shows us what's powerful by what they freak out by. And they're going after Amish. They're going after home churches. They're going after backyard gardens.
Hey, why do you think there's been a suppression of Native Americans all these years? The Native Americans is one of the richest, most incredibly beautiful cultures ever created on the face of the earth. Whether you're talking about the Maoris or, I mean, the Aboriginals in Australia. I mean, these people in many ways hold the key to our success. And those are values that I really resonate to.
And they're independent. They're not commercial. They're the enemy.
So we need to, as a culture, as a people who care about liberty, care about freedom, care about the future of our country, we need to start setting that intention. I mean, we're never going to go, unless something horrible happens. I mean, the iPad's a part of our life. The cell phone's a part of our life. So what does that mean? How can we use technology in the right ways? How can you be an independent reporter? How can you create your own systems? How can people create their own systems to connect people together? How can you use the systems that are in place, the Facebooks and the Google Pluses? How can you use that to your advantage? If those systems are going to be there, you know what I mean? Instead of just plugging your fingers in your ear, well, how can you use that to your advantage? Of course,
I agree.
You're going to be spied on, but...
But a lot of people say, don't use any of the system. I say, do both. Build an alternative system and come out of the Babylon, but at the same time, go into the Matrix and use its own system against it. Do both.
Mm-hmm. Having been inside the music business, I can agree with you on that.
Well, I have to say this. I have seen an exponential awakening because I don't claim to be the best at what I do. I mean, it's the imperfectness, though, that basically fits into the larger whole. I have seen my own personal success reaching tens of millions of people. And there are so many others that are more articulate, who have greater gifts than I. And I'm seeing them come online. And I know that in that true diversity, that's what the corporate board can't stop. They can play whack-a-mole all day long, but they can't stop the signal.
Yeah, and this is what I would say in conclusion. Even if you, Alex Jones, were wrong about everything you ever opined, even if you were wrong, the fact that you were willing to put those ideas to create that debate, that is the key. That's why people shouldn't be so scared of those ideas. And that is the key to our future, I think. It's not about whether or not you're right, I'm wrong. That is a system that's put there in our psychology by people who want to control our individual intuitive systems. Because at the end of the day, look, people can sit here and watch us talk for an hour. If they think we're wrong, great. If it's coming from their own heart. If people sit here and watch us and they say, these guys don't really know what they're talking about, and that's coming from inside them, that's God speaking through them. And maybe we are wrong. That's perfectly fine if it's coming from their own internal system of intuition. If they're buying a corporate narrative that convinces them that we're wrong just because we're opening our mouths and we're questioning something, that should scare them, because that means they're robots. That means they've been controlled by somebody along the way. They're not thinking their own thoughts, they're thinking somebody else. And that's Orwellian, and that should frighten them.
What about this point? I find a lot of people say, you're probably right about this, but what are you going to do about it? I choose to join the system. They think it's like joining the winning team or a bandwagon. When a team's going to the Super Bowl, well, then they buy the jersey or the T-shirt. It's almost like they think they can join with this inhuman, cold system because they've made a decision. I try to explain to them, you may delusionally think you're part of the system because you've joined it, but it's a system that destroys humanity. I mean, the only way to win is to resist this. And that's why I say resistance is victory. It doesn't mean we have all the answers, but we are saying we don't agree with this. And I think out of that debate will come the answers.
Yeah, any system that's devoid of true leadership is troubling. And so when I see that in people where they just accept an idea without actually having their own internal debate, I mean, we've all been in those dinner conversations where you just kind of throw something out in the middle of the table and somebody goes, no. And you go, well, where did you get that from? Well, I was listening to, Oprah or something, you know what I mean? They didn't actually have the thought. They heard somebody else express it and they say, oh, I agree with them.
And they repeat it, but sometimes it's worse than that. They say, I hear what you're saying. I've talked to engineers. Mm-hmm. One time I was out camping, at our family, ranch, and I wasn't deer hunting, but we had some deer hunters there leasing the property, and they were all engineers. And I said, well, they found 2 of the passports in the rubble that day. That's impossible. And they said, I hear what you're saying, but as an article of faith, I can't believe that. And I was just like, well, that's crazy.
But see, the way I look at stuff like that is if somebody needs to believe something for themselves, that's fine for themselves. That's okay. Because trying to convince somebody of something that they don't want to believe is sort of a fruitless effort anyway. But at the same time, you have to be careful to preach to a choir. So really what myself as an artist and you as a pioneer in alternative media, really what we're talking to people is on the edge who are willing to listen. The people aren't going to hear you anyway. It's sort of irrelevant, you know what I mean? They're just going to put their fingers in their ears, or they're going to create a debate within themselves that's going to negate no matter what you say, no matter how brilliant it is. And the people who already believe you, well, in some ways you're just preaching to the choir. It's the people who live on the edge who are really, they're uncertain of their own personal narrative and they're looking for information. Those are the people that ultimately you're reaching out.
I totally agree. So many people go and speak to their family or whatever, and they get brushed off. They think, well, I'm done trying to wake people up politically, spiritually, whatever the case is. And I'm like, no. There's always going to be the mass of people that just want to be followers, that don't want to hear anything complex, that just want to go cook their TV dinner and watch Dancing with the Stars. We're looking for the people that are in love with information and real reality and who get the fact that it's interesting. That's who is going to govern our future. And that's why the globalists try to dumb everything down and have people not have a debate, because they're scared of people that do want to have a discussion.
If I can offer a personal take on exactly what you're saying, I think we're a lot closer to a tipping point in the consciousness of humanity than it would seem to be. There are people who have done studies of these types of things. You don't need 100% of the people to go in a particular direction. You only need like 20% or so.
Well, 10. Yeah, the studies I've seen, 10,
okay.
You got it. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's say it's 20 just to make me look good. Let's say 20% of a given population needs to believe an idea for the other 80% to actually consider it as legitimate. Well, I think we're a lot closer to that number than you think. And again, it's not about the specifics of a particular idea. It's the idea to be open to the ideas. And I think we've seen a systemic dumbing down of the population over the last 20 years. Most of the people that I talk to, and I talk to fairly successful and intelligent people, believe that the country's been dumbed down. Some believe it's been dumbed down on purpose. Some believe it's a resource issue. There's not enough money for the schools, stuff like that. Doesn't matter. But I do see a different type of awakening going on where people are engaging in topics and debates about things that were always off the table. It's not uncommon for me to be in a restaurant and hear people at the next table talking about the Federal Reserve, because that idea has now been introduced into the mainstream culture via Ron Paul or somebody like that, saying, why is this there? Why is this even in the chain of things? And even the idea, it's called the Federal Reserve, and then you come to find out, well, it's not even a branch of government. That was shocking to me when I found out about 10 years ago when I saw a documentary by I think it was Aaron Russo, right? Yeah. I happened to see him present the documentary, didn't even know what it was about, and was surprised. And so the point is as we're on the edge of these ideas, we're closer to the tipping point of people wanting to hear a different narrative, because the narrative that they've been fed is no longer working. You know what I mean? So yes, so you see a turning up of the volume of the opiating aspects of society, a dumbing down of our culture to keep people more salaciously engaged. But for this whole other part of the population, they're in a much more rigorous debate than I've ever seen in my life, and I know that you see that. That's encouraging to me. So if we can get a big enough number in that particular realm, then that other 80% is going to be much more likely to listen, because in essence they follow. They're not people who are going to take the first step into a new opinion.
Well, I agree with you. That's why the system is panicking and throwing out all the stops. And I found with those that are even partially awake, the acceleration of the tyranny is only waking them up faster. And we talk about,
but you see it. It's a calculation. It's like any general is going to calculate his risk versus his reward. Whoever's running those systems, whether they're benign, conscious, unconscious, whether it was the Soviet eras or the Nazis or the Khmer Rouge, at some point they have to make a decision. If we don't come in and kill all these people or wipe all these people out or suppress this particular idea, it's going to get out of control.
Wow, you just scared me with that, because Brzezinski, I've talked about this on air, 2 years ago said the people are waking up, the elite's in deep trouble. He made statements last month, and he's written about it similar in his new book that just came out, and he said 20, 30 years ago, it was easier to direct socially through propaganda 1 million people than it was to kill them. Now it's easier to kill them than to have them believe us. And that's what's dangerous, is the elite are now discussing killing people to stay in control. They realize that they cannot. Look, I believe we've already won. As you said, it's an exponential ripples in a pond. I can see it. Mm-hmm. The very fact that they're so greedy and want to destroy culture to control it and make people poor so we're controllable is going to make the empty bellies that cause people to wake up. So the elite have kind of engineered the direction they're going in, but they're not God. They're not all powerful. And now they're discussing really draconian things. And you see gun sales are at all-time records. I don't see this working.
But again, well, the way to counter darkness is with light, and that's why I go back to the spiritual point. I think everything that you're willing to address is worthy of thought. And the difference is whether we shroud that in shadow and anger and frustration and powerlessness, or we put light on it and say, you know what, I want to know the truth. You know what I mean? Because to me, it's what core central idea you come from. If you say, I want to know God, or I want to know love, or I want to know the truth, that will direct your discernment. It will direct what you care about. If that's true, which I'm sure it is, about the gun sales, that scares me, because that's essentially people reacting out of fear. Now, you may say that's prudent, and that may be. But in the higher octave, what needs to happen is people need to not be resonating with fear, because they need to understand, if they come from truth, that the right things are going to happen eventually. Now, whether you're a sacrificial lamb or not, whether you're willing to put your ass out there in the middle and get your head cut off, there's plenty of history to indicate that can go either way.
I agree. Let me just say this. I overall do not see it as positive that there's record gun sales, except that it's some form of action. It's not in a catatonic, narcoleptic coma. At least they're recognizing that there is a threat. I wish it was, I've said this on air, I wish you were at your city councils and at your state houses and knocking on neighbors' doors.
That's buying a gun, whether you would agree it's true or not. That's more responding to an existential threat. The real threat is in your local communities, where you're not taking care of the people in your local community. If everybody took care of the people in their local community, it would eradicate a lot of this ability to control us.
Exactly, but at least it's some steps showing they know there's a problem. And I've said, I wish you would use this as energy to go out and reach out to people, instead of talking about how you're going to shoot UN troops.
Yeah, I do believe if we were to if we engage in if you're willing to engage in the idea that there's a controlling force that wants something to happen and it's negative, right? I'm on the side that believes that ultimately that ruling force wants the least amount of trouble. And the least amount of trouble is to keep people opiated, stupid, uninformed, and believing a narrative which is really simple.
Yes.
Good guy. I have a wrestling company, right? What do? Good guy, bad guy. Okay? So I sit there and watch all day. You watch CNN, you watch Fox, good guy, bad guy. Dumb, right? So my point is as long as we're willing to try to understand that the narrative's being narrowed, if we're willing to be awake and listen to our own being in there, and whether they agree with you or not, that is the revolutionary concept. That is the thing that leads to the victories that all of us want to have. A happy planet, a safe planet, a green planet, whatever.
It's an info war. It's a fight in our minds, not physical.
No, I don't, and listen, again, if we're willing to believe that there's somebody standing there behind a curtain that wants bad things to happen, if they had their druthers, my guess is they don't want any trouble. It's far easier if everybody just gets in line and watches the same TV programs and just it all dumbs itself down and it ends up looking like Brave New World. Take this, be quiet, go to your job, da, 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 da. So I'm hopeful that we don't have to get to any point that involves anything horrific or violent, and that may sound a little Pollyannish, but I have to believe in that. I can't believe in the other version because that takes me into a darkness that I don't believe in. I don't believe in that darkness. It doesn't mean I don't believe it's not there, but I don't believe in that darkness. That darkness is not going to get me or you anywhere.